Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Lauren. I am the book review events coordinator and publicist. Welcome back for episode 4 of Write America. I can't believe we're 4 weeks in already, but we've got an amazing lineup for you tonight featuring writers Patricia Marx and Garry Trudeau. If you missed the first 3 installments of Write America, you can go to Book Review's Crowdcast channel and watch the recordings at any time. Tonight's episode is also being recorded, so if you know anyone who couldn't make it live tonight, they'll have the opportunity to watch it too. And I will drop the link for last week's episode with Russell Banks, Major Jackson, and Alice McDermott. I'll drop that link in the chat along the side. And before we get started, I would like to give you a little bit of a tour around Crowdcast in case this is your first time with us here tonight. Right below the stream, right down here, there's a button. If you click that button, it says click here to buy signed copies of Patricia Marx and Garry Trudeau's books. If you click that button, it'll bring you right to bookreview.com where you can purchase signed copies of their books. There is also an ask a question button down here somewhere. If you have a question for Patricia and Garry during the readings tonight, just drop it down there. And then there is also a chat, which I see a few of you have found, where you can comment about the readings, drop your emoji applause in there, smiley faces, whatever you would like. But without further ado, we are going to get started. Patricia Marx has been contributing to The New Yorker since 1989. She is a former writer for Saturday Night Live and, personal favorite of mine, Rugrats, and she is the author of several books. Marx was the first woman elected to the Harvard Lampoon. She has taught screenwriting and humor writing at Princeton University, New York University, Columbia, and Stony Brook University, and was the recipient of a 2015 Guggenheim Fellowship. Now, in conversation with her tonight is going to be writer Garry Trudeau. Garry has been drawing the Doonesbury comics, his Pulitzer Prize-winning comic strip, for more than 40 years. In addition to cartooning, Trudeau has worked in theater, film, and television. He has been a contributing columnist for the New York Times op-ed page, an essayist for Time magazine, and a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. So, let's welcome to the screen Mr. Garry Trudeau and Patricia Marx. Hi, thank you for being with us. Hi.
Thank you.
All right, well, I will leave you to it.
Thanks. Hi, Garry.
Hi, Patty. I'm so happy to meet you finally.
We don't like 100 emails equal meeting, or no?
Feels a little bit like it. Yeah.
I guess I'm going first. But first I'm going to cough. Roger, wherever you are out there, thank you for organizing this series for such a good cause. I don't know what the cause is, but I am all for it. I also don't know how long my pieces are because the idea of practicing them in my room alone embarrasses me in front of myself. So, somebody hit the bell. So Lauren, if I go over, just take me off. I don't want to do that one first.
No, we're in control here, Patty. You can go.
We are in control.
Yeah, you go as long as you want.
Nightmare. All right. I'm gonna read 1 or 2 pieces, and they should be approximately 15 minutes. And I thought I'd start with a downer. It was a Shots and Murmurs called "Singing in the Acid Rain." Dear parents, what an exciting year 2058 has been for our 3rd grade class. Summer is just about to begin, and already we've seen 148 days of rain and a lightning bolt that spelled wear a hat. As we prepare for our end of term barbecue, a few of you have asked whether the event will be canceled because Thursday's forecast calls for increased yuckiness. No way. Didn't we learn in October that when life gives you wildfires, make s'mores? The prediction of a hurricane of hail and fire doesn't mean that it has to be all gloomy and doomy for our class. except for Dee Dee Davis, who was swept away by a roving glacier last week on her way to school. In lieu of flowers, please send donations to the Where Have All the Flowers Gone Fund, care of Dark Horizons Elementary School. Our children are not the future. Next, snacks. I know that we were all disappointed last month when our nutritionist, Mr. O'Donnell, announced that the cafeteria would no longer be serving its famous Miami coconut patty treats on account of Florida not existing anymore. Mr. O'Donnell promises to whip up an even yummier replacement in time for the barbecue. I can't say more. It's a surprise, but please let us know if your child is allergic to anything, including radioactivity. Hey, I hope everyone is psyched for our year-end field trip to the newest Jersey hot springs, which used to be the Delaware Cold Springs, which used to be Amazon.com rainforest, and before that, the island formerly known as Prince Edward. We still have not heard from many of you about whether you'd like to reserve a level A hazmat suit for your child or supply your own. On the permission slip, don't forget to check the box that prioritizes breathing over once-in-a-lifetime experience. By the way, some parents have asked for guidance on the best way to talk to their children about our unfriendly environment. It's important to reassure young ones that it's not the planet that's going to disappear, just humans. And anyway, this will probably not happen before school starts again. Why not make this a teachable moment and try to instill Darwin's concept of survival of the fittest? Then the fun part, explain that millions of years after mommy and daddy and everyone else your child loves is wiped out, a new life form will emerge. And it might look like a sponge. It's also important to let kids know that the apocalypse is not their fault. Mr. and Mrs. Nail Buff, this may not apply to Emily, whose science fair project, How to Make Ebola in the Kitchen with a 3D printer and some glitter, is still in quarantine, along with Emily at the Center for Disease Anxiety. One more item before I tell you our gerbil news. Unless you're living under a rock, sorry about the avalanche on Lava Lane, Dylan, you probably know that our class recently made the front pages of both high mercury level news and Trump's Wall Street Journal. Thank you, Mia Stein, for bringing the screeching possum you found under your bed for show and tell, and then, whoops, fatally dropping it on its head. We were all glad when the critter finally shut up. How fascinating to learn the next day that it had been the last surviving screeching possum in the world. Congratulations to Mia on becoming the youngest ever violator of the Endangered Species Act. Way to go. To show its support for the Steins during their legal battle, the class voted to change show and tell to show and kill. What's more, we're working hard to even things up by creating a brand new species. Remember the ferocious striped polar bear that showed up in our faculty parking lot on Groundhog Day and still won't leave? Mr. Alvarez, Earth Science, is showing us how to splice its genes with those of his dog. Cross your fingers. Mrs. Kittle's third grade class might soon be the proud copyright owners of the world's first polar doodle. Oh, I almost forgot to tell you that yesterday, while Mr. Alvarez was showing us the potatoes that came out of his garden, already roasted by that thing in the sky we thought was a rainbow, our gerbil gave birth to an offspring. But we don't know yet if it's an animal, a vegetable, or a mineral, 2.3 ounces. We named it Spatula. Over to you, Garry.
Well, that's just delightful. I'm wondering, because it's possible to tell from the first sentence exactly You know, you get in the lower school vibe, and 2058, and then plus the title. So I knew right away I was going to enjoy that little journey because you had a very strong tentpole idea. And you know, another one that kind of reminds me of you. You did a piece called Boyfriend Walking, which was a kind of mashup of two ideas: the annoying boyfriend during a pandemic and being quarantined with him, and walking dogs. And I thought, with that idea as well, I thought, oh, that would be so much fun to write to. I mean, not steal it from you, but it's like, this is something you should give your classes, is give them that premise and just let them go, because they're both of those. I mean, there are many others, but those are the two that come to mind right away, are so rich. And I would think, I mean, if I had one of those or both of those ideas, I would think, okay, I can't wait to get to work, because it's that robust, you know, an armature to build something on. Do you feel that way, or are you just laboriously piecing it together until it finally becomes this thing?
Writing is a terrible, terrible thing. But thank you for, when you introduced that compliment and you said, you know, the first sentence told it all, I thought it was going to be followed by, so why did you continue? It's really, I don't know if you find this, you're kind of confined to a more tighter canvas, but there are some humor pieces where you want to give away the premise right away, and some where you leak it out, and it's always, I mean, some you want to just tell it in the title. I forget what other questions there were, but I sometimes get ideas and I think they're really great and it'll be easy to write, and then it's always cut to, I hate this so much, I hate this so much. I also think, and tell me if you find this, the hardest thing, well, not the hardest, one of the many, many, many hardest things about writing, coming up with an idea, is knowing when you should quit and when you should keep going. And I think it's a bigger question. I mean, I think it's always kind of, when do you break up with the guy?
I don't really have that problem because my work through the years has been so deadline driven. So it has to be done when it's done, and there's no opportunity to overwork it. You just hope to get it to where it's good enough. You know, when people sometimes say, well, don't you ever run out of ideas? And I just thank them for not noticing. There's plenty of times I don't have ideas, but you have to do it anyway. So that's a different set of constraints and pressures with the strip. The essays, you know, I have probably almost as much difficulty as you do in letting go of them. But, you know, if I have just a strong backbone like those two pieces have, it just gives me so much confidence. Then it's just fun to riff on it. So maybe I should get to one of my pieces.
Please do.
I should say that, you know, while Patty and I are both associated with comics, she with her wonderful collaboration with the great Roz Chast and me with a strip, we agreed that reading captions and strip dialogue wasn't going to work here. So fortunately, both of us do write things that lend themselves to the occasion. So at Roger's direction, I've reached into the archives for pieces I've done. Roger actually told me what things to read, so he bears full responsibility if this doesn't work out. So this first piece doesn't really need a setup. It sets itself up. It's called My Inner Shrimp. For the rest of my days, I shall be a recovering short person. Even from my lofty perch of over 6 feet, as if I don't know within a micron, I have the soul of a shrimp. I feel the pain of the diminutive, irrespective of whether they feel it themselves, because my visit to the planet of the teenage midgets was harrowing, humiliating, and extended. I even perceived my last-minute escape to have been flukish, somehow unearned, as if the commissioner of growth spurts had been an old classmate of my father. My most recent reminder of this came the afternoon I went hunting for a new office. I had noticed a building under construction in my neighborhood, a brick warren of duplexes with wide westerly facing windows, promising ideal light for a working studio. When I was ushered into the model unit, my pulse quickened. The soaring 22-foot living room walls were gloriously aglow with the remains of the day. I bonded immediately. Almost as an afterthought, I ascended the stairs to inspect the loft, ducking as I entered the bedroom. To my great surprise, I stayed ducked. The room was a little more than 6 feet in height. While my head technically cleared the ceiling, the effect was excruciatingly oppressive. It certainly wasn't a space I wanted to spend any time in, much less take out a mortgage on. Puzzled, I wandered down to the sales office and asked if there were any other units to look at. No, replied a resolutely unpleasant receptionist. It was the last one. Besides, they were all exactly alike. Are you aware of how low the bedroom ceilings are? I asked. She shot me an evil look. Of course we are, she snapped. There were some problems with the building codes. The architect knows all about the ceilings. He's not an idiot, she added, perfectly anticipating my next question. She abruptly turned away, but it was too late. She'd just confirmed that a major New York developer, working with a fully licensed architect, had knowingly created an entire 12-story apartment building, virtually uninhabitable by anyone of even average height. It was an exclusive high-rise for shorties. Once I knew that, of course, I couldn't stay away. For days thereafter, as I walked to work, some perverse, unreasoning force would draw me back to the building. But it wasn't just the absurdity, the stone silliness of its design that had me in its grip. It was something more compelling. Like some haunted veteran come again on ancient battlefield, I was revisiting my perilous past. When I was 14, I was the third smallest in a high school class of 100 boys, routinely mistaken for a sixth grader. My first week of school, I was drafted into a contingent of students ignominiously dubbed the midgets, so grouped by taller boys, presumably so they could taunt us with more perfect efficiency. Inexplicably, some of my fellow midgets refused to be diminished by the experience, but I retreated into self-pity. I sent away for a book on how to grow tall and committed to memory its tips on overcoming one's genetic destiny, or at least making the most of a regrettable situation. The book cited historical figures who had gone the latter route: Alexander the Great, Caesar, Napoleon. The mind involuntarily added Hitler. Strategies for stretching the limbs were suggested: hanging from door frames, sleeping on your back, doing assorted floor exercises, all of which I incorporated into my daily routine. Get up, brush teeth, hang from door frame. I also learned the importance of meeting girls early in the day, when, the book assured me, my rested spine rendered me perceptibly taller. For 6 years, my condition persisted. I grew, but at nowhere near the rate of my peers. I perceived other problems as ancillary and loaded up the stature issue with freight shipped in daily from every corner of my life. Lack of athletic success, the absence of a social life, the inevitable run-ins with bullies, all could be attributed to the missing inches. The night I found myself sobbing in my father's arms was the low point. We both knew it was one problem he couldn't fix. Of course, what we couldn't have known was that he and my mother already had. They had given me a delayed developmental timetable. In my 17th year, I miraculously shot up 6 inches just in time for graduation and a fresh start. I was, in the space of a few months, reborn, and I made the most of it, which is to say, thereafter, all of life's disappointments, reversals, and calamities still arrived on schedule, but blissfully free of subtext. Once you stop being the butt, of course, any problem recedes, if only to give way to a new one. And yet the impact of being literally looked down on, of being made to feel small, is forever. It teaches you how to stretch, how to survive the scorn of others for things that are beyond your control. Not growing forces you to grow up fast. Sometimes I think I'd like to return to a high school reunion to surprise my classmates. Not that they didn't know me when I finally started catching up, They did, but I doubt they'd remember. Adolescent hierarchies have a way of enduring. I'm sure I'm still recalled as the midget I myself have never really left behind. Of course, if I'm going to show up, it will have to be soon. I'm starting to shrink.
Oh, I like that. You know, it's so funny that Roger picked that for you, because at least once in every email he sends me, he calls me Shorty. But I'm thinking, you gave me hope, because I'm thinking in my 7th year, I can grow. Even on Zoom, I'm shorter than you. Well, it is a great piece in it, and it's very thought-provoking. Like, what do you think you would have been like if you were tall?
Well, I don't know. You know, it's been my experience that being marginalized in adolescence and being escorted to the sidelines is not only indispensable, possibly a prerequisite to writing comedy. It creates the space to become a better noticer, not only of your own foibles and troubles, but those of others. It almost conveys an adaptive advantage. Do you relate to that at all?
It's different being a short girl. Because I think, but I do relate to that point of view, that you are a little more detached, and you can study what it is that makes the person that you wish you were. But as a girl being short, you get kind of a cute complex. First of all, it's great. I mean, as a boy or girl being short, because you're assumed to be very smart, because it's like, I'm 8 years old and people are going, she can talk. It's amazing. So you kind of have an edge there. But then you get gray hair and it's no longer, look at that, she can.
Well, when I say relate, I don't mean necessarily to my particular issue, but just something that really holds you back and sets you aside and marginalizes you during those formative years. Did you have any version of that?
No.
You were the cool girl.
I was not the cool girl. I was always second. I was liked by the cool girls, and I was a conformist as much as I could be, you know, like my poor mother would have to go, but I thought you liked Red Sox. No, that was yesterday. We don't like Red Sox anymore. But either way, you are made aware of what normal and what abnormal is, and I think that probably helps being funny. I mean, in my next life, I'm definitely going to be 5'10" and a half. And I rollerbladed for about 12 years just so that I could look down on people. I don't know. I wish I could say that I was more unpopular than I was. It's not that I was the most popular, but I was always acceptable. But for whatever reason, this is a question I just always hate being asked, and yet I'm going to tell you, like, were you funny as a kid? Were you funny as a kid?
Not particularly.
Yeah, I asked my mother, because I was going to write a memoir about being the first girl in the Lampoon, which, by the way, I didn't do, because my first sentence said it all, which is, this book could be a lot funnier if more people would die. But I said, was I funny as a kid? And she said, well, people ask me that all the time, and I think you had a lot of friends, so you must have had a personality. I take that as a no. But I wasn't the class clown. Were you the class clown?
No. I mean, that's a different kind of camouflage.
That's a different kind of funny, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a different. I don't know. As I say, I just think it gave me, it deepened my perspective. I could look at the passing parade, I think, with a little bit more understanding and sympathy. Mm-hmm. My son has a medical condition that that is chronically painful for him.
Mm.
And I remember talking to him about one evening, and I was commiserating with him, and he said, yeah, it sucks. He said, but everybody's got something.
Mm.
And I thought, that is so wise for a young man in his early 20s, that an awful lot of people don't figure that out until towards the end of their lives. So I think I might have had a little of that. I might have seen that everybody has something, and that kept the satire from getting maybe too dark and deep. But at the same time, I do think it sharpened my perceptions is about just how silly the human race is. So it positioned me well with my little pea shooter as I'm watching humanity pass by.
It certainly gives you empathy. I think I became funnier. Everything was going my way. I got to graduate school and I didn't finish my thesis. And it was the first time that I kind of failed. And from that moment on, I think it's really important that you experience a failure. Probably the younger, the better.
Yeah, the younger, the better. Right.
Because if you wait too long, you're just, it's shattering and you don't have the tools. But should we get on?
Yeah, let's move on. Let's move on to your next one, Patty.
Okay, now I can't figure it out because I was going to read two. Let's see. I'm going to read. Wait, I got to find it. I'm not going to read that. I'm not going to read that. I'm not going to read that. I'm going to read this, I think. I'm going to read Retraction. I tried to come up with something that had to do with writing. And this is Retraction, and that's what it is. Yes, there were slip-ups. I changed Pharisee to Philistine, and the corner of Locust Valley and Donkey Drive to Road to Damascus. When I said it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, I neglected to add not in a row. I also got it wrong about Joshua bringing down the walls of Jericho. It was Morty the contractor. And trust me, you don't want to know. To those readers who consequently became so nervous that they erected flying buttresses and spackled, I'm sorry. A few of you have asked about the burning bush. I never saw it, but I definitely heard there was a troop of reckless Girl Scouts camping nearby. And I have received a lot of letters from bachelors eager to know whether Roof of the Wheat Fields is single. I regret to say that Ruth is a composite. Partly a girl I dated, partly my mother, and partly a cup of barley. The Good Samaritan is my Uncle Benny, and obliged by court order, I left out the detail about his cheating at marbles. I also failed to include toenail fungus among the plagues, but I stand by my omission because there are limits. This brings me to the Egyptians. God didn't smite them. Smite isn't even a word. Frankincense is another word I made up. Circumcision? You can't think I was serious, can you? No matter. There are two kinds of truth, and my book is the other kind. Do not listen to Stu Plotnick. He has been spreading lies about me ever since he read Luke 22:7-39. Is it my fault Stu wasn't invited to the supper? Does he think it was my guest list? I'm a scribe, not an event planner. While I'm on the subject, no, Stu, they weren't actually sitting on only one side of the table. Don't you know a metaphor when you see one? And no, Bartholomew did not say, take ye this meat back to the kitchen, for I ordered medium rare, and this is medium. Evidently, Stu Plotnick has never heard of poetic license. Stu has challenged the accuracy of my work. If you define accuracy as the quality of being accurate, then yes, Stu, I suppose you have a point. But accuracy, as the archer will tell you, is what killed the mountain goat. Besides, how accurate were you, Stu, when you changed your surname from Plotnik? Were you hiding something? Stu has accused me of abusing the facts. But what he does not understand is this. Facts are opinions made dull. If it is a sin to change the name of the Twin Cities to Sodom and Gomorrah for the sake of spicing up an insipid story, then yes, Stu, I have sinned. If it is a sin to give the meek hope that someday they're going to hit the jackpot, then yes, Stu, I have sinned. If it is a sin to turn questions into commandments simply because they sound better that way, to give a carpenter a couple of nifty superpowers so as to amuse the young adults, to rewrite history in order to sell more books, and maybe even, cross your fingers, the theatrical rights, or to write a succession of sentences that begin identically, then Stu, why don't you just crucify me now? But you know what, Stu? To quote Ecclesiastes, there is a time to make a left on Donkey Drive and a time to make a right, a time to knit and a time to purl, a time to wear a hat and a time to wear one of those visors, a time to use onion salt and a time to use no salt, a time to drink wine and a time to drink wine excessively, a time to cry and a time to make others cry, a time to tithe and a time to move your gold pieces to a Mesopotamian bank account, a time to lend the Applebaums your scythe, and a time to say, no, I'm sick and tired of lending you things. I will not retract my words, Stu, but it is time to make one emendation. While we all agree that we should love our neighbors, I would add that does not apply to the Plotniks.
Who is Stu?
You mean, who is he in the story or in my life? Yeah. He's just somebody who has accused the narrator of making up things.
I mean, is he a critic?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I think he is. He must be a journalist or a critic. Yeah, a critic.
Yeah. That's just marvelous.
Thank you.
That's again, you must have, once you got your idea down, you just must have had a little bit of fun writing it. I mean, it's you got a lot to work with.
It takes me so long. I mean, you're lucky and unlucky that you have deadlines like that. I have deadlines for nonfiction pieces, and I think they're easier than writing fiction. You've written both. I mean, at least you know what you might not know how you're going to say it, but you know what you're going to say, and you can at least turn out a bad piece. And if you have a topic, which I'm often given or I often come up with, that is really interesting to somebody, that like if they see it in the table of contents, they're just going to read it no matter how bad it is.
Right.
It is a nice feeling.
Must give a lot of thought to that table of contents teaser.
Well, I don't give anything.
I mean, it's not done.
But I mean, maybe not literally, but there's something about coming up with a topic that everyone wants to read about. You and I are baby boomers, and I don't know if you feel this way, but because we were we represented the most number of people in the population, you feel that everything you're interested in, everybody will be interested in it. It's sort of true.
Because at one point everybody was.
Yeah, I mean, now
there
they're
were
dead
things
or something.
to be interested in.
Well, that's true. That's true.
There was a broader public conversation, and now there are thousands and thousands of different Listen, I want
to ask you a question. Do you think it's a good or a bad time to be writing comedy?
I know there are people who have a view of that. I never had. It's always a good time. I mean, human beings are going to behave like human beings,
Right.
and the political environment doesn't matter that much to me. Doonesbury has for years been, I think, misunderstood as a political project, and in fact, it's not. It's about, and particularly in an off election year, I would say maybe 10 or 15% of the material is political. It's about the characters. It's very character driven. I have 75 characters that have,
Yeah.
have congregated over these last 50 years.
And that's why your stuff is so good and it lasts. If you were purely topical, by the time you were in the middle of the panel, you really wouldn't care to finish it because it's so,
right.
Comedy is so fleeting. But yours, I completely agree. It's why I love your stuff. I mean, I think that it's a good time to write bad comedy and a bad time to write good comedy. It's kind of like starting a telemedicine company now. It's the right time. There's a lot to material, and yet there's so much competition.
Huge amount of competition, and voice. Any given voice is less influential, resonates less broadly, and I kind of think that's a good thing, that the internet has democratized the opportunities for all sorts of artists of all different kinds, and let 1,000 flowers bloom. Now, it's easy to say that we're towards the latter part of our careers, but I think it's a good thing. I think that the barriers have fallen, and that there's more opportunities for more young people to become art. Now, I'm going to, because we have to move right along here.
Okay, you should.
I'm going to see your Bible apology with a book review.
Okay.
This Roger said not to do this one, so I have to do it. This wasn't on his list, but I don't know how closely you pay attention to this administration's scandals, but one of them has to do with Biden's dog, whose name is Champ, and he has been attacked on Newsmax as being unpresidential. That's the word they use, because he's old. He's a senior dog. And and then they say, well, he looks like a junkyard dog. He's not presidential the way Millie was. But
you made this up, or is this a real
No, this
thing?
is all true.
Okay.
This is, I know I spend too much time on Twitter, but this, this is, this has been a thing this week. So that got me thinking about Millie. And this historian who was on this show said, I think probably facetiously, well, Millie had her own staff. But whether she did or not, she did have her own book. And I don't know if you remember that, but she published a bestseller. And so when I was, doing my thing for the Times, I reviewed the book. And I'm wondering if you'd be interested in hearing this timely review. Okay.
I would.
It's called Stupid Pet Trick. George Orwell understood. All animals are created equal, he observed in Animal Farm, but some animals are more equal than others. Especially, he might have added, those with book contracts. With the publication of Mildred Kerr Bush's Millie's book, Morrow, 141 pages, 1795, we are beset by yet another memoir from underfoot, an interspecies communique so unstrung, so eager to please, that it leaves us picking hairs out of our brain pans. As is usually the case with Lapdog Lit, nothing is held in abeyance. The worshipful profiles of dog-owning mandarins, the fulsome salute to the freakish breeding stock they underwrite, the glad acceptance of the dog's less than exalted place on the food chain. Ms. Bush confesses to a fondness for vermin. All the familiar markings of the popular canine confessional are on full display here. It seems native to the genre, indeed to the perpetrating genus, that the dog's world is always held uncritically, licked clean of the self-loathing that ordinarily coats the examined life. As Michael J. Rosen observed in his estimable introduction to The Company of Dogs, dogs have more love than integrity. Quote, "They've been true to us, yes," wrote Mr. Rosen, "but they haven't been true to themselves." Ms. Bush would seem a case in point. Indeed, the very model of personality transference. For in Bush the dog, we find exactly that mixture of deference, blind fealty, and dopey exuberance that has proven such a potent political cocktail for Bush the man. Such is Miss Bush's need to stand in the cooling shadow of a more evolved species, that she ends her account with this telling coda, quote, "The Bushes love me, they told me so, but they love people more, all people." Truly felt, no doubt. And yet in the author's self-effacement, one detects not only the charming grace note she intends, but also a cri de coeur, the low, lonely moan of the only species on earth that ever took domestication seriously. Try whistling for your cat. Betrayed since the end of the Ice Age, the dog is no tougher for it. When Barbara Bush whispers to Millie on Air Force Two that, quote, "You are so ugly, you have a pig's nose, you are bow-legged, and your eyes are yellow," the author lamely resolves to, quote, "try harder." Other slights are swallowed whole. Miss Bush is sent to finishing school to, quote, "brush up on my manners." She is arbitrarily barred from the White House tourist routes. She is forbidden to sit on the museum quality furniture. All of this is born of equanimity. And when a Washington doyen gushes to the president that the best thing this administration has done is Millie, and the first lady dismisses the comment as, quote, "silly," emphasis the author's, one finally senses the resentment that is the hidden heart of Millie's book. Does this second agenda, this banal settling of scores, make Mildred Kerr Bush this administration's Patty Davis Reagan? Conceivably. Even recounting her lawn kill, quote, "4 squirrels, 3 rats, and to Barr's great sorrow, a pigeon," the author has trouble retracting her clause. What kind of woman, she seems to be asking, mourns a pigeon, but signs off on a squirrel massacre? The same kind of woman, it turns out, who could coolly inform Miss Bush that her beloved brother-in-law, Guy, quote, "was given to a friend in Tallahassee where he got eaten by an alligator." Such sordidness is surprising in a fully authorized insider account, but these are sordid times in the publishing industry. There are books to be sold, and what hope does a Springer Spaniel have in a market dominated by Daniel Steele and Andy Rooney? One can only hope Ms. Bush will summon more restraint in her capacity as editor of the recently announced Thank You Notes of George Bush, The Wildcat Years.
That was great. I love Lapdog Lit, and just so many good, The Kill, the series of things that he killed. What is it about animals? They're just so funny. Are you an animal person?
Yeah, but I can't draw them. So for the most part, they've been left out of my other work. I do have 2 cats. One of them usually wanders during Zoom. She seems to be attracted, and so don't be surprised if she shows up before this ends.
Okay. I'm not an animal person, but I love writing about them, and I don't know why they make such good material, but they do. I think, as you demonstrated, you can insult them as much as you want, and they have no comeback.
No.
But what should we do? Should we read another piece?
Yeah, let's keep going, because
right.
we're bumping up against.
Okay, then I have eeny, meeny, miny, mo here. I was going to read from my first novel, which makes it sound like I've done millions of novels. Or I was going to read an animal piece, but I won't read an animal piece. But I won't.
I love that you're deciding on the fly here.
I know, I should have prepared, right?
No.
But, kills the spontaneity. I just can't decide. If only I could take a poll. All right, this one is like, okay. This is a novel called Him, Her, what is it called? Him, Her, Him Again, The End of Him, which I wrote a long time ago, and someone asked me not long ago Is it about a transgender? And it's not, but man, that is a great
I
title
know,
for that.
great
for that.
title. Great title.
So this is really kind of a memoir. This is about a narrator and similar to me. And she, this is her first job, and I worked at Saturday Night Live as my first job. And this narrator works at something called Taped But Proud. And I'm embarrassed to say that I had this kind of, when I had my first job, I was pathetic. You have to help me, I said in a snivel to my mother over the phone. It was 1:30 in the morning, and I was in my office at Taped But Proud, having been on the job for not even 4 whole days. I'm supposed to write a sketch by tomorrow about Belarus. I wiped away tears with my sleeve. And it has to be funny. A sketch about Belarus, my mother said. They tortured a journalist because he was criticizing the government. I said, a sketch about that. It has to be topical. Well, let's see, my mother said. Belarus has a very poor human rights record. I know that, I said with a sigh. But can you think of something funny about the situation? My mother didn't say anything. There was also a siege on the orphanage in Belarus. A few children were killed, I think. It could be about that, I said, as if I were being helpful. But it still has to be really, really funny. Hold on, my mother said, putting the phone down. Wake up, I heard her say in the background. We have to write a sketch about Belarus. Belarus? I heard my father say to my mother in a groggy voice. What about Belarus? Something funny about the situation there, my mother said. It has to be topical. What time is it? I heard my father say. Here, I heard my mother say, you talk to her. Let me get this straight, my father said to me. You have to write something about Belarus? I need at least 3 pages, I said. Wait a minute, my father said. I can't think unless I'm dressed. My mother picked up the phone. Isn't there someone at the show who could help you? She said, no. I mean, yes, I said. But I can't ask anyone anything. They think I know how to write. I trick them. You're a very good writer, my mother said. First my thesis, now this, because she hadn't written her thesis. Okay, my mother said, what if, don't worry, wait, I just thought of something. My mother must have pressed the button on the intercom because I heard a low-pitched tone. In my parents' new house, there was an intercom in every room. Mother, I heard my mother say. My grandmother was staying with my parents for a few weeks. Are you up? My mother said. Mother, wake up. We're going to meet in the den to write a sketch about the old country for Taped But Proud. But Grandma doesn't know how to write a sketch, I said. Yes, but Grandma's from Romania and she's awake, my mother said. We'll call you back in a little while. When? I said. I said that before my mother had finished her sentence. We just have to think, my mother said. We'll come up with something. I could hear my father in the background. Daddy wants to know if Poland could be in the sketch. Sure, fine, I said, as long as it's really, really funny and 3 pages. I stared at my computer. Some time went by. It always does. The phone rang. It was my father. What if you had the Poles storming the whatever, intending to free the journalists, but they fail because they're such nincompoops? You could enact every Polish joke in the book, starting with the changing a light bulb. I said, and then I didn't say anything else. Grandma thinks it's funny, my father said eventually. They don't seem to like ideas that are, quote, too jokey here, I said. Isn't jokey the point, my father said? I'm going to end here because there's just too many pages.
Well, so this is lived experience for you at this point, right? You've been at Saturday Night Live and you're.
Oh, and yeah, and I called my parents in the middle of the night and asked them to help me with, what did we call? I forget what we called them. Maybe cold openings or premises.
I can't imagine why you thought that would be useful.
It
They'd
was
be the last people I would call.
My parents are pretty funny. They were pretty funny, and I was really desperate, very desperate. To this day, my brother comes up with sketch ideas for me for Saturday Night Live, and I have not worked at the show for eons.
Yeah.
And so you never like were desperate.
Yeah.
I have to tell you though, after college or after this or sometime, for some weird reason, I got an offer to write a syndicated column for King Features. And I told my parents this, and my mother said, if you take that job, we will get an unlisted phone number because our marriage isn't strong enough to take that.
I used to call my parents to, particularly my father, to see if he got something, if it made sense to him, because we lived in a small town, and he was a very, very bright guy. He was the town doctor, but he had pretty mainstream tastes, and so if I was too far out on a limb and I was writing about something that interested me, but was going to just be puzzling to the average reader, he would be quick to tell me.
And did you ever decide he was wrong?
But he never
go
gave
ahead
me an
anyway?
idea.
Oh, I took ideas from wherever I could, and my parents were very critical. I mean, that's why I trusted them, because they'd had bad things about me.
Yeah.
My mother once called me and she said, I read your piece. I said, uh-huh. She goes, guess what? I didn't like it. She said, but if enough people like it, I'll change my mind.
Hey, Lauren, can I read my last one?
Yeah, go for
Yes.
it. Absolutely.
Okay, I need some guidance, Patty, since there were two that Roger approved.
Okay, I'll pick
one of
for
them's
you.
about Madonna. The other's about it's kind of a meditation on tree houses. Which you prefer?
What do you? Madonna. What do you think, Lauren?
I don't know. I'm curious about the tree houses.
Okay,
That's
tree houses. Tree houses.
Okay, and then we'll go right to the questions.
Yeah.
My old college roommate Joe, an artist who over the years has spent some particularly sweet summers with his family on a hillside in rural Vermont, has the right idea about tree houses. A treehouse, of course, is not about housing, nor to Joe, a skilled carpenter, is it remotely connected to the craft of woodworking. It is instead airborne sculpture, best left to the imagination and exertions of those young enough to make it right. Such was the sensible philosophy behind the work in progress at the edge of his property. The kids, some his, some not, scrounged around for odd bits of timber, dragged them 40 feet up into the upper reaches of the enormous evergreen, and banged them willy-nilly into the limbs, fashioning a jumble of a shack, planks jutting out, overlapping, merrily askew. Joe's job, by his account, was to sip beer in the shade, occasionally make sure the key nail work was up to code, and to keep a sharp eye out for small plummeting bodies. Now, Fred, an actor friend living in suburban Connecticut, had a more hands-on approach. Unlike Joe's property, Fred's is not strewn with cast-off building materials, so his backyard dream sent him scurrying off to Lowe's to pick through bins of 10D coated nails and to load up on 2x6s, even though everyone knows that 2x4s work fine for treehouse framing. Once on site, Fred embraced the powerful fiction that he would be assisted by people under the age of 10, and indeed for a while he was, using children to hold timbers in place until he clocked his daughter with a beam and she climbed out of the tree and went in to watch television. Thereafter, his strategy for enticing his children skyward was to incorporate as many bells and whistles into the design as possible, including portholes, hinge shutters, and trapdoors. The main attraction, however, seemed to be the sheer height of the treehouse. Its function for the children quickly devolved into an offloading platform for anything Fred was silly enough to haul up. Even this Letterman-esque fascination with watching things smash on the lawn wore off when a large spider set up residence, and all subsequent suggestions to play in the tree were greeted with protest or tears. Fred, who thought he had created kid-friendly folk art without compromising its integrity by making it perfect, is now left with a few summer memories, a scary bill from Lowe's, and a tiny unoccupied second home. Are there fathers more clueless than Fred? Why, yes. Pity, if you will, the Trudeau children, whose father has taken treehouse construction to dizzy new heights of obsession. Their treehouse is damned with more right angles than not, and flush level beamwork and pre-cut cedar shingles right out of the box. It has everything but a mortgage. The children are too polite to say so, but the question hangs heavy in the air. Whose childhood is it anyway? Our miniature flying bungalow is not the work of juveniles, however suggestive it is of the handiwork of a wannabe. Its builder, who brandishes sleek, shiny power tools and wears his cowhide nail belt to dinner, has tried to coax his offspring up into the trees, but their participation has been desultory and oddly patronizing. He's doing it for them, he assures both them and himself. But even as he works well past dusk, fastening studs, flashlight tucked between clavicle and neck, his youngest, 8, stands below, trilling his mocking refrain. I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to use it. No matter. The truth is, I enjoy the view from the double-hung windows in Daddy's treehouse. From one side, I can see the kids and their mother playing ball without me. From the other, the neglected lawn. Although the floor of the structure is only 6 by 4, not counting where the tree interrupts it, I like to lie down on it and close my eyes and listen to the creaking of the stress points. When a good wind comes up, it's like being in the bowels of a windjammer, rounding Cape Horn, I imagine. On quieter evenings, with the crickets calling out and the kids indoors playing checkers, it's a good place to take stock, although I rarely do. I am too much in the present. That part I got right. Recently, my reverie was interrupted by the appearance of my 11-year-old son, clutching a book of cartoons I had done many years ago. I flipped through them, barely feeling a connection. My career genesis was the very essence of being in the right place at the right time. But the miracles of serendipity are usually wasted on its beneficiaries. The young feel entitled, even to their accidents. I was hired to scribble dispatches from the generational front lines, and so I did. And now my son has climbed up a ladder to ask me what they mean. My explanations are halting, imperfectly summoned. Looking at him, I wonder, how could I have ever presumed to speak for the young? Last weekend, to unanimous indifference, I put the roofing shingles on. At least the treehouse won't leak anymore, which means it won't rot before it's torn apart by the unsynchronized growth of the trees it's attached to. And lately, the children, seeing clean, sanded surfaces, have started drawing murals of their favorite baseball players on the interior walls. An airplane model has been hung, and trading cards decorate the window frames. It's starting to look like a place where children come to play.
Lovely.
That was awesome. We have quite a few questions here. I would like to start with one because I'm genuinely curious. If you were both not writers, what would you see yourselves doing for work?
Metallurgist or insurance adjuster? No, I would definitely be, I have a serious answer. I would be a visual artist, a painter or a sculptor if I had talent. Or that would might be number one. Number two would be medical researcher because I love disease, hate sick people. Or lighting designer. That's serious, those three.
What about you, Garry?
Well, I too would love to have been an artist if I had the talent.
Oh.
You know, my craft is on this strange little intersection of writing and drawing, and somehow I got the combination right so that it found an audience. But I don't feel I'm particularly competent at either of those disciplines. Maybe a little stronger as a writer. But yeah, I would love to have been an artist. I gave up painting in college. I thought this is hopeless. I just don't. But I think, as a more serious answer, I think garden design. I really like being outside and but I'm a little bit torn about it because gardens are basically plant zoos, right? We collect specimens and we stick them in usually in environments where where nature wouldn't put them. Mm-hmm. And I'm always struck when I travel. You'll arrive at a place like California in the spring, or I took my mother to Prince Edward Island one June, and the entire island was covered with lupin. And to see a single species say, "Yeah, this is where we belong," is awesome. And meanwhile, you're back at home planting your one little lupin bulb, hoping to coax it out of it. So I am a little conflicted about it, but I've always, time spent in my little plot of land always seems worthwhile to me.
All right. Well, that was not what I was expecting from either of you. So we have a question here from Diane. She asks, how do you deal with writer's block if you are ever afflicted with that malady?
Oh.
Well, I already answered the question.
Yeah, you're not allowed to have it.
You're not allowed to have it.
Yeah, you have a deadline.
I sort of answered it too, but I love repeating myself. I have it, and I don't have it when I have a deadline, but I write a lot on spec, like all shouts and novels and things like that. And I complain a lot to other people. If it is an assignment and I can't do it, well, I always spend like a lot of time trying to get out of something, and then finally I just can't get out of it. Like even this, when Roger asks me,
you can't leave now.
He twisted my arm. I tried so many times to not do this. And the one problem with the pandemic and being quarantined is that, like, what are you going to say? Like, oh, I am going to be in my living room then, and my computer is in my office, so I'd like to. I just am miserable and think, why didn't I listen to my parents and be a doctor and marry a doctor and have a doctor and then I just exhaust myself and I do it. But it's really hard. And then I kind of understand. I make a turn and I can see where it's going. But it's hard for me to get to the point which would seem very obvious to others.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It doesn't look like work to anybody else. Understandably, I straighten pictures. I wash the dishes. Anything to not do it. But when I was doing the daily strip, I knew exactly how far along I had to be on any given week. If it was 2:30 on a Thursday, I knew exactly how much work I had to have done by then. And it's 4:45 and then it's 10:15 the next morning. I know exactly where I had to be. And because of that, I was at a necessity. I had to create the mosaic of these pieces of a story arc out of order, because you can't afford to jettison an idea if you have it. So I would think, okay, I generally want this to be about such and such, but at the moment I only have an idea deep into that idea. So I would do the Thursday strip, and then I would have to reverse engineer it to get back so that it made sense. So in a typical week, I would do Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Monday. I would just do them all out of order because there just wasn't time to discard an idea because you weren't ready for it or because it didn't fit into what you originally thought. It's an odd way to write, but other cartoonists had other ways of doing it.
I couldn't do that. Something's wrong with me because I have to go from the beginning to the end and not know where I'm going so that I can use what came before to get to the next place. But that's me. But it is true, Garry. I mean, it looks easy, and the goal is to make it look effortlessly easy, no matter how many times you wanted to kill yourself.
Yeah.
Now, Garry, you mentioned something earlier. You said that comedy makes you a noticer. And this reminded me.
No, I think being a noticer made me available to comedy.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, noticing things and comedy kind of goes hand in hand. It actually reminds me a lot of something that Jerry Seinfeld said in his Netflix show. It's got comedians in cars getting coffee. I don't know if you've ever watched that before. But he also brings up in that with humor and comedy, there is, some sort of a line that you shouldn't cross. And now when we see people cross that line these days, there's this whole cancel culture coming after them, ready to end your career. Have you ever experienced, either of you, anything like that where you're afraid to kind of go there because of cancel culture, or are you afraid ever to cross a line?
Well, I mean, do you want to go, Patty? Or
No, I don't want to go.
oh, okay. So the answer isn't afraid, but aware. When I was, when I was first starting out, I'm in a very bizarre industry. Each newspaper is sold one at a time. It's a salesman walking into the office of the editor and saying, "Do you want to buy this?" So I was very aware of who all the editors of the newspapers were, and I knew them all in the early years, and that they were clients. They were the reason I had a job. So I would, I would get in trouble a lot because I was writing, I just came right out of college and I was writing about sex, drugs, rock and roll, politics, all the things that were interesting to my peer group. And this was a little unusual for the comics. So I kept getting bounced out of newspapers. And so, I'd get into two and then I'd lose one, and then I'd get into another two and then I'd lose one. And so I did this very naive, strange thing. I sent a questionnaire out to the editors, about 15 editors of major newspapers. And I said, what's acceptable for me to write about here? And I even, you could check the boxes. I even had a little laundry list. I don't know what I was thinking, but most of them actually took the bait and sent me back the list. And I said, well, that's very interesting. This guy is okay with marijuana, but he's not okay with sex. And anyway, but one editor, the editor of the Providence paper, wrote me back and he said, I really don't care what you write about. If you think about it, if you give it some thought and you write with care and nuance, and it's obvious that you have a point of view that you can defend, I'm good with anything. And this is in the early 70s, and you have to imagine what the comics page looked like in the early 70s. And I thought, oh, this is weird because he's really advocating for responsible humor, responsible satire. And those two things shouldn't be in the same sentence. But I've come to learn through the years that all of life is editing, right? I mean, if we said everything we thought, we wouldn't be married, we'd have no friends, we'd have no job. All of life is editing. So I would think, I would try to take the kind of care that these various very serious subjects required. And obviously I'm not going to hit it all the time. At one point I was up to 1,100 newspapers, and that's 1,100 communities, all that have different community standards. And you can't expect to please everyone all the time. Now, I did a very strong week about transvaginal exams in Texas, this sonogram law that the Texans passed a few years back, and about 70 newspapers dropped it. But they all came back. And I think, what that said to me, I felt so good about that, because what that said to me was, okay, our communities don't want to see this. So we're going to drop it from the paper. Come back next week? Sure. So that wouldn't have happened to me early in my career. They would have just dropped me. But I do think you can build some sort of goodwill and trust through the years if you keep in mind this general mainstream audience that you're writing for. And don't try to, be hipper than them and smarter than them and edgier than them. So that's a longer answer than you probably wanted.
No, that's a good answer. Go ahead.
I'm kind of with, too bad for me, but I don't have the wide audience that Garry does. And I write whatever I want to write, really. I mean, I don't really want to offend people. I think that there's no topic that you can't write about. It's what the underlying point of view, but if you can't make fun of the oppressed, you can certainly make fun of the oppressor. assuming you're an okay person, which is a big if for me, but that you're not going to really write something that's horrible because you would stop yourself. So I don't worry about it. It's hard enough to write stuff that's funny, and I'm going to get rejected for millions of reasons. So I just write to be funny. That said, I mean, I think that, and it's why Garry's stuff's so successful, that really funny stuff is also true. And there is a fundamental universality to it. So if you're going to be this kind of hateful person, it's not going to work. I mean, you have to be expressing an opinion, however masked it is, that is representing you. So I don't really, it just sort of comes out of who you are.
Okay, we have one from Heller. This one's from Garry. For Garry, do you miss seeing the Doonesbury characters continuing to age and change?
Well, I still draw the strip on Sundays, but it's true that it's very hard to move them forward in time. There are relatively few story arcs and developments in terms of continuing character development, and I do miss that a bit. The reason I stepped aside from the dailies is I was working in television for a while, and so that was a Jones I just had to kind of embrace, because it was a lovely experience. If you've been spending most of your career in a room by yourself, there's something kind of wild and wonderful about suddenly having to collaborate with 125 people and make all that work. Turns out I'm suited to it. It's kind of what I wanted to do in the very beginning. I wanted to be this. I had this little theater group for when I was a kid, up until I was from 7 to 17, a little neighborhood theater group, and I wanted to be an impresario. I didn't want to be the funny guy on the stage. I didn't want the spotlight on me, but I liked creating a world and populating it and dressing it and lighting it, and out of nowhere came this alternative idea for doing just that with a comic strip.
Now, do you find that since you had that you cut back on them and you're doing them only on Sundays now, do you find that it has changed the way that you're writing them?
Well, I have more time to do them, which I think. I mean, I'm not to say, but it seems to me the Sundays are better now, just because I have more time to write them and rework them, and I'm generally more satisfied with what goes out the door than I was before. I'm really enjoying that luxury of having more time. Still a deadline, I had to make one before this, and I was kind of sweating it today. But yeah, I also have grandchildren now, so I'm fine with how it's all working out now.
Yeah.
I've been just so lucky that I've been able to stay off the streets and do the thing that I really love for all these years.
Let me see here. This one's from Megan. This is for both of you. Garry, you mentioned that you are both now in the latter part of your careers. I hope that neither of you will ever retire, but in that eventuality, do you think about what your second act would be?
No, not for a second. I draw a blank when I think of a life after writing. I'm not sure what that is. Patty, do you have any idea?
Well, partly I feel like I'm always retired. I mean, I've decided I don't sleep, so I get 24 hours in a day, and I am really good at wasting time. But I imagine I'll always write. I mean, it's not digging ditches. I mean, it's hard, but it's not like. Although I'll tell you what would stop me, and Lauren will understand this, given that we spent about an hour trying to get me connected today. Technology might do it for me. I don't know if I can learn one more thing, but as far as the writing, I'm fine. If I could go back to 1987 and just keep doing it.
Let me see here. What do each of you like to read? And do you take inspiration from things that you read?
This isn't really answering the question, but there's one word that's similar. One of the pleasures of the pandemic for me has been I'm in reading groups. I'm book clubs. I was never in them, and I'm reading all of the things I should have read. I was in the first book club I was in was the Moby Dick club, and I read it, but I didn't read it. But the funny thing is, and I don't tell anybody this. So I started a Moby Dick group, but we had to delay it. And the delay lasted so long that I asked my boyfriend if he would read Moby Dick with me. And he said, okay. And then we're into it like 40 chapters, 35 chapters. And the first reading group said, well, let's start now. So I cheated on both reading groups, on both book clubs. I didn't tell each book club about the other, but the second book club that was kind of behind, I'd make these very, very prescient comments, and one of the members said, I think you know stuff that you're not telling us. So I'm reading all of the books that I was supposed to read.
You were cheating?
Loving it.
You were cheating at your book club?
Yeah.
This is unbelievable. Well,
I recommend
it would be a book club for just a single book.
What? Oh, well, no, we're doing.
I could see War and Peace, but.
Hey, I'm listening to War and Peace in the kitchen when I go there, and it's amazing how much I'm in the kitchen. It is the most hilarious book. It is. I'm not being funny. It's much funnier than Moby Dick. Well, Moby Dick's pretty funny. Yeah. So I'm in 4 book clubs, or you could say 5, because from the class I'm teaching, we have to read every week. And it's great. That didn't answer your question, but it's an answer.
Okay. And Garry, what about you?
Well, you mean other than popular media, which I just, newspapers and magazines, which I still spend most of my time. As far as book goes, I guess if I had to pick a category, it'd be history. Just finished a book called First Light about a RAF pilot in the Battle of Britain. I'm writing on a project, so it's about that. So it's related reading. About half the time I'm reading something because I think I want to get into it in the strip, or I want to get into it in a screenplay or something.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now we have a question here from Susan Isaacs. She's one of our participating writers. So this touches upon the writer's block again, but specifically, do you have any techniques other than whining and complaining to everybody that you know, Patty, about what you're writing? Do you have any techniques to kind of get you through writer's block?
No, I mean, I really do. I kind of given up on complaining to people because I know how annoying it could be. And I try, people always say, oh, you did this before, remember? And then you go, yeah, but this time it's different. Okay. I have none. I have zero. How about, well, Garry, you don't really have.
Well, no, but for the most part, I'm just in a position to write about things I want to write about. Mm-hmm. And, I'll go down rabbit holes and hope that readers come with me. I've written in the strip about really bizarre stuff, I went on the New York Times expedition to find the Loch Ness Monster in Drumnadrochit, Scotland. And that was actually a disaster because I got so into the technology, I lost all the fun of the myth of Nessie. But over the course of my career, another thing that just comes to mind is I read a really great book by a bioethicist. I've forgotten his name, but he wrote a book about voodoo. And I thought, voodoo, how can I work voodoo into the strip? Well, I turned, Duke into a zombie. And, once I understood how voodoo worked from having read the book, and you just, well, are readers going to be interested in that? You just have to assume that if you're interested in, and also if you feel good about writing it, if it feels like it's coming fairly easily, then you've got a good shot at bringing your readers along with you. Mm-hmm. But I have no tricks for pushing through writer's block.
Mm-hmm.
Editing is much better. I mean, this isn't the same question at all, but I do feel that I've been writing for a long time, and I have not, I have not gotten better at writing. I've always had a lot of ideas. That's never my problem. I always have a lot of ideas, but what I've gotten better at is editing myself. I know quicker that what I'm writing is a piece of shit, and I know how to edit myself. And you sort of have some formulas in your head that have sort of leaked in there, but I have no tricks for writer's block.
I never developed, and this is horrible advice for writing students or people who aspire to be writers. I've never developed the habit of rewrites because there's never been time, and so it's just not part of how I do things. If I have to write an essay, I take a lapidary approach. I just put in one piece, another piece, and another piece, and then it's done. And sometimes I go back and move a couple things around, but it's a nightmare for me when I send it in to the editor to do their job, and then I have to talk them out of most of what they want to do. Mm-hmm. Who feel they have to edit. And I thought, no, it's exactly as it should be. So
yeah, I am constantly rewriting, and what I'm really good at is deleting. I mean, I could end up with negative words if I have long enough. But I'm while I'm writing, I'm constantly rewriting. So when I get to the end, 300 years later, I never structurally change anything around, but I tweak a lot, and I'm always rewriting. It's so much easier.
All right. Well, I think I've kept you long enough. We will end with just one more question. What's next for both of you guys? What can we expect from you?
Well, that's a version of the earlier question, and I really can't answer it. I have two colleagues, Gary Larson and Bill Watterson, who did two fabulous comic strips called Far Side and Calvin and Hobbes, and both of them quit within the same year, about 25 years ago. And Watterson, I think, was more a question of I've said all I want to say. I'm just going to become a repeating decimal if I keep at this. Mm-hmm. I've done what I set out to do. Larson was more, I can't take this any longer. I'm burned out. And he tried all kinds of things, taking long vacations and just doing it on weekends and just doing it on Sunday. And so he finally just quit. I've never felt that way. I have taken a sabbatical or two through the years, but that was simply to do other things. It wasn't that I needed a break from it. So I think if one day I woke up and I thought, God, there's nothing there, there's no motivation to do it, and I don't enjoy doing it anymore, it's just a burden, then I'll step away from it. But at the moment, I'm knock on wood, that's not part of my experience.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What about you, Patty?
I am working on a novel, and I hope not to delete it, but you never know. And I'm writing a children's graphic novel with my friend Ross Cast, and I have a piece in the New Yorker soon.
Very exciting.
And laundry.
Awesome. So we'll get some clean laundry and maybe some garden designs from you, Garry. We don't know. We don't want to count you out. All right. Well, thank you both so much for being here with us this evening. Thank you to everyone who tuned in and submitted questions. And of course, thank you to Roger Rosenblatt, the man who dreamed this whole thing up. So we will see you next week with Mr. Alan Bergman and Adam Gopnik. And don't forget, click this button right down here or visit bookreview.com to buy signed copies of Patricia Marx and Garry Trudeau's books. So thank you again, and we will see you all next week. Bye.
Thank you, Lauren.
Bye.
Bye,
Thanks,
Garry.
Lauren.
Bye, Lauren.
Bye, Patty.